Our guests on this episode of the podcast have a podcast of their own, and they travel the world chasing billfish. They provide some amazing content to the fishing community, and they make apparel specific to the sport of offshore fishing. Leo Chapman and Anthony Pino join us from the Billfish Gear State of Sportfishing Podcast. We had the pleasure of collaborating with these guys over the winter and joined their podcast as guests. It was a blast, a lot of laughs. And if you haven't listened to that one, definitely check it out. If you haven't listened to their podcast in general, you absolutely should. Like us, they have some really awesome guests from around the world in for conversations. They interview captains, mates, boat builders, and other key players in the sport fishing world. In addition to their podcast, they also have a great line of sport fishing apparel. They have a custom gear part of their business, making shirts and apparel for all sorts of sport fish programs around the world. They were an absolute awesome group to talk to and pick each other's brains on what it's like to actually run a podcast. And we talk a ton about fishing. Being that they specifically billfish so much, we talked a lot about dredge fishing on this one, bait and switch, teaser fishing, really everything. So this was a blast. Really want to try to make this a regular podcast each and every season for you guys, and we hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did. So without further ado, please welcome to the podcast Leo Chapman and Captain Anthony Pino and the Billfish Gear crew. Welcome to the SeaBros Fishing Podcast, where we follow 3 words of wisdom. You can't catch them if you don't have a hook in the water. Always trust your instincts. And the last, you'll just have to keep listening. Stay tight.
Yep, that's the one. That's the real one. Get up there, man. All right, back down low. All right, down low. We doubled up. We doubled up. All right. Am I coming off or what? Get that down. Don't get on that rock right here.
What's up, guys?
Going on?
Dude, Anthony, I don't know what we're doing, but they have a setup, man.
Working on it, buddy.
Well, we're also
cold.
cold, hibernating in the same spot, and you guys are in Miami and
Traveling the world.
So there's definitely a trade-off for having a fancy office studio.
Oh yeah.
Office. I mean, that's a spaceship. You're like you're about to freaking nuke China.
We're actually going to be rebuilding a whole podcast studio too, believe it or not.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Really? It looks like you guys are at the command center of like the Falcon or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Millennium Falcon.
Chewy's right here to my left. If he barks,
Yeah, I see next to Han Solo flying that thing like Jesus.
So
we are recording.
yeah, we record right off the rip. So if there's anything that you guys want cut out or whatever later, you can shoot me a text or just say it in the moment. George listens through and through to each episode and makes all the edits. So
Yeah, so you can say cut out George.
Okay.
He's
Okay.
a little snake.
Shout out to George.
yeah, George, I know you're gonna have some work cut out for you on this one, pal.
I gotta be.
Is Nick gonna join us, or the 4 of us, or?
I think he's fishing.
Yeah.
I don't know if
It's-
today's the beginning of the Jimmy Johnson tournament, but I think he's.
Yeah, he's pre-fishing. I'm B team today.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, B team. Whenever Nick can't go, I jump in.
Cool. Well, it's nice to sit down and again, boys, it's been
Yeah.
the first 2/1 were awesome.
The first one, I mean, it's always better on the first take, but the second take we made it pretty good too.
No, it was.
I heard you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I
sorry.
heard you guys got. I heard you guys had some issues with that pod.
Yeah,
Yeah.
technical difficulties, but I think it was the perfect situation for it to happen. We forgot to hit record like 45 minutes in on 2 episodes and had to go back and redo them. It's just part of the game, you know?
Yeah, having the GoPro running is huge too, because that's getting the audio as well.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
There's been
So you guys record the audio through the GoPro,
Yeah. Yep.
but then through this as well. So like you get the video through Zoom and the audio through the GoPro.
Yeah. So our actual
of the GoPro.
our module, we basically have a module taking the audio in from the computer and from the GoPro and gives us redundancy. So we have the Zoom recording and then we have what's recorded on our recorder, our Zoom recorder.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that way if one falls out, which
It's science, you know, it's
yeah, I don't know.
it's what gets done.
It's the command center of the White Falcon type of things, you know?
Yeah. So so I guess we'll get started. We just have a couple random questions. We usually start these things off with sort of an off the hip ask you everything from what your favorite food is to what your favorite type of hook is to fish for blue marlin. So we're just gonna rapid fire away and then I'm sure we'll go off on a few tangents and it'll eventually take us to how Billfish Gear and the State of Sportfishing Podcast all came about and what you guys are all about. So, you want to start? You want me to start?
I mean, it's kind of a joint question, but we started the podcast relatively like the same time as you guys, and I feel like they're different but also similar in so many ways. So it's really cool to see both of them growing. And you know, we listen to yours. I know you guys listen to ours, and you guys have some amazing guests. But like, what inspired you guys to really get a podcast going? And it might be something that you want to start, you know, way back in your kind of story of life. But what really got you going with the podcast?
Anthony, should I take this one?
Yeah, it was your idea.
Yeah.
Just kind of here.
Okay, let me cut that one out, George. I'm a beginner at this. I'm B team, remember? But yeah, so the origins of the State of Sportfishing Podcast, it goes actually way back. So So my name's Leo, by the way. I'm the founder of Billfish Group. I started the page a long time ago, and I made the first post with my own thumbs, and basically every single post that still happens today is through me. So if anyone ever wants to shoot us a message or something, you guys can always reach me through the Billfish Group Instagram page. But yeah, no, we started the podcast. I'm a big podcast guy. Let's start there. I listen to a lot of podcasts, at least 2 or 3 a day. I listen to podcasts all day. Barely even listen to music at this point, right? And I have been for a long time. And when starting Billfish Gear a long time ago, I was a massive, massive fan of Andy Frisella. Do you guys know who that guy is?
I don't actually.
No.
He has a really cool business podcast called Real AF with Andy Frisella. And back in the day, it was called the MF CEO Project. And mind you, I was young, right? So I started Billfish Gear when I was, 18, 19. And I really started getting serious around 20. I'm 26 now. And I didn't know anything, right? So I learned the principles of sales and customer service, leadership, and all that stuff through his podcast. So I was a very avid consumer of information through the podcast method, right? So I always knew because I was such a big, consumer of podcasts. I just thought to myself, damn, it would be cool if Billfish had a podcast, right? But I did, back then technology wasn't where it was today. Zoom wasn't a thing. I think it didn't even exist, because it came through COVID, right? But back then it was Skype, and that was it. But I knew it was a big thing. Right. So I wasn't sure about it. I have like a weird accent. So I was just nervous about it. So I ended up never really doing anything. But I actually did record one podcast. It still airs. It's still on now. It was with a couple of guys in Alaska. I don't even remember what it was about, but it was like through FaceTime audio with my phone being held to the mic. Just horrible. And I think that was in 2018, 2017, long time ago. I just did one podcast, one episode, because it was just so bad. It was a Team Getson, actually. You can still listen to it today. And I keep it on there so we can listen back one day and be like, damn, that's how it all started.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So started with that. Then 2 years passed and nothing really happened. Then and I came to mind again, like we should really start a podcast. Then Zoom came about, things got a little bit more modern, and I contacted my good friend Chase Niederer, who's a mate. I'm not sure what his boat's called, but it's in a big tribute. It was Chase and Skipjack, and I asked them if they wanted to just do it. And that's kind of how it started. So I started out with them and Skipjack and just talking, and we just had guests on board. And one of the first guys we had was John Floyd, president of FNS Yachts, and he was an awesome guest. And it immediately got very popular because we had a really cool guest on, right? So I started doing it once a week, and it was going well. But it wasn't the way it is today. Like, it was Skipjack on his phone, chasing things on his phone. Like, I did my best with like one of those Samsung mics, but it wasn't anything great. Because we just had to figure it out, And as time progressed, it started catching on. And then, I spoke to Anthony about having Anthony on, because I think Anthony messaged us a while ago that he wanted to do something as well. I don't even know how that really happened, but
I don't know what
Anthony
made you call, like, text me or call me about it. I know because I'd never met you. I texted you about a couple things just over the Instagram, but I don't really remember how it all came about. Then you called me, and for me, I was happy that you guys had both started the pods like at the same time, and I got to drive down here to the boat at Wrightsville Beach, and I was listening to like fly fishing podcast, anything to do with fishing, and the mentality of like getting into people's heads about how they approach a day or a season or whatever. And there was no offshore ones, and then eventually you guys, both of you, Leo, and you guys, it kind of popped up at the same time, and I was like, thank God, because 7 hours is a long.
Yeah. I think now that I think back about it, I think I was talking to Sportfish Outfitters and White Stackle, like those guys. They just bought Grand Slam at that time.
Yeah.
And about doing a pod together, something like that, because I just felt like we needed someone like a real Capt, because I'm an angler, right? I'm not in it on a day-to-day basis. So my knowledge is limited. I've seen things, I've seen my share of things, but I'm not nowhere near Anthony or Nick, right? So I just felt like we needed to have someone who's a little bit more experienced. And I don't know, I was talking to them, and Anthony came to mind because we spoke. We've always been talking about like social media stuff. Remember, Anthony? Yeah. And I guess it just kind of just happened like that. I also think that's to do with your uncle Bill. I'm not gonna lie, because I think I had a podcast with your uncle before you came on.
Yeah.
So I think that was like the catalyst that brought it to mind again.
100%. It's Bill. I mean, Anthony, your whole family has an incredible network within the sport.
Yeah, they're awesome.
So it makes sense,
Yeah. So then Anthony started, and then at some point I was like, hey, you know what? Because Nick's my partner in the company, and he knows a lot more than I do. And I just knew he would be a better fit than me for this. So I was like, hey, Nick, do you want to give it a shot? And he was actually pretty reluctant at first with it. He wasn't really sure about it. And I was pushing him to do it.
There's certainly a stigma. I don't know if you guys deal with it up there about, self-promotion in this industry. Like, you can't, if you do well, you can't say it very loud. Like, even at the time, I feel like, so I was nervous about doing it. And then I knew, like, now getting to know Nick for a couple years, he said he was nervous about doing it at the beginning, but I was like, fuck it. Like, I was just happy to be asked, and I appreciated that. So first couple were with Leo. I remember doing one, like, we had one scheduled, and like I had to do it on the dock rigging baits because at the time we didn't have a full-time mate. The Marlins were fighting. So my boss is like, let's go fishing. I'm like, fuck yeah, let's go fishing. It's like the fucking pod. So I was like doing the rigging baits while doing the pod.
Yeah,
but
it's authentic.
Yeah. And
that was a fishing podcast right there.
that podcast was awesome because I remember doing it with Anthony, and now that you're saying, I remember Anthony, and people were walking by and they're like, "Oh, I did a podcast," and Anthony's like,
"Yeah." I remember the guys from the wave paper were coming by, and we were like, it might have been between the White Marlin Open, the Mid Atlantic, and those guys just like walked by, and I was like, they just you enter a tournament with those guys, and you might as well just give them your share of the money. So, and they just won top boat in the White Marlin Open. I was like, these guys come. So, but no, I was just super happy to be invited to do it. And then, I think the first guest that me and Nick have, I think we had Bubba Carter on, was the first guest that me and Nick did by ourselves, and that kind of set us off because we kind of both knew who he was. So
getting a few heavy hitter guests on initially is super helpful. We experienced the same thing. We had our dad. No. We had we're fortunate enough, we're really good friends with Jeff Corwin. I mean, we're a Northeast podcast. Like that's our bread and butter. We're New England, the Northeast. Like we've been lucky enough to fish everywhere, but the group of people that we, socialize with and network with fishing wise are all here. So one of our first guests, really good friend of ours, actually, if you listen to the pod, he saved my dad's life, was Jeff Corwin, the Animal Planet, wildlife guy. And
that one was a
great storyteller. Like it's really all it is. Like if you can get a couple good guys, good people, good guests, good ladies, whoever on early that have really good stories, you're off to the races. The content just starts to build itself. And it sounds like with you guys with Leo, like even though I think you're not giving yourself enough credit, calling yourself an angler and all this. I mean, you're one of having this podcast, like you're one of the, shining lights in the whole industry at this point. So I think you're selling yourself a little bit short there, but having you being able to manage it on the back end, it's insane to see the growth in a 2 to 3 year period. I mean, I know we're seeing it. I'm sure you guys are as well.
Yeah, I think the network that he created on the Billfish like just the Billfish brand. I mean, he was able to. I think he knew Bubba before that, Leo, right? But you were able to get some heavy hitters, and like at the beginning, like you guys to say that really set us on the right foot, and it just was up to me and Nick not to fuck it up too bad.
I mean, look, the thing is, people underestimate it, right? When people small things like reputation and your word is bond and doing right by people, like it compounds, right? It compounds. And over time, you get a reputation for doing things right and standing for the right values and putting out a good product. And then before you know it, like word spreads. So like even if we do a podcast, like, and we ask call it a big time guest to come on, they know about us, know that we stand for the right things, so they're open to coming on, right? So I guess personally, like for example, Bubba Carter, I've never met Bubba in my life personally, but I have very close friends which are good with Bubba. I know people who have been partnered in businesses with Bubba, like Gray Ingram and stuff. They know Bubba, so like it's a very small world, and as long as you just don't, that's what you don't want to fuck up. As long as you don't fuck up your reputation in the small niche of sport fishing. People just appreciate and people are willing to support. Fishing is one of the few industries, I think, that people really, really support each other genuinely a lot.
There's a general sense of community in the outdoors.
Yeah, like the camaraderie is real.
Hunting, fishing doesn't matter, really, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I feel like, for example, like I'd never met Nick until like a couple weeks ago, face to face, and we could just and I felt like the same with you guys, talking to you guys on our pod. I felt like if you have the right things in common and then the rest of the kind of takes care of itself, we can just chat forever about it. And then, where those relationships go is who knows, some of them are just kind of like, you kind of just say hi to each other. And some people you just get to know and become friends with for forever, and you help them out. It's really incredible to be able to, like, for example, like the community being so big geographically but so small, like, overall, like when we took this boat to the Dominican Republic last year, I could call a handful of people, and I had all the phone numbers for like the drivers, how to deal with everything. So I didn't really have to. I wasn't guessing, it all went smoothly, and it like really impressed my boss, like how smoothly it all went. I was like, I just knew the right people, thankfully, and they were willing to help.
Yeah.
So
but it's just good people in this industry. It's so small, and people are so quick to cut that as soon as someone kind of is sloppy around something, that spreads, man. And like as soon as you don't do the right thing, it spreads, and people filter you the hell out, right? So and at that same time, I'll give an example, like especially with fishing, I've made some crazy gambles of like, you can't even, like things that if I tell someone else, they'd be like, what? Things like having someone I don't know bring $5,000 worth of gear to Key West. You know what I mean? It was just a customer of ours who just happens to live close to HQ, and we just need to bring the gear. And he's like, yeah, I'll drive it down. Never met this gentleman in my life. Like, he could take it and just disappear into the sunset.
Yeah.
But like, especially in this industry, like the people who I guess mingle are usually all really good people. And that's just a blessing that I think is underappreciated. Honestly, it's really lucky that we are in this industry.
I don't know. It might be it might be unique to our industry. I don't know, or I've never been in another industry, so I can't say, but I'm super thankful for it to be the way
unique.
It is,
It's unique.
It's very unique.
And at the end of the day, people are trying to have fun. They're trying to, the whole point of fishing and outdoors is to smile. So, like more often than not, people are in a good mood, whether they're talking about fishing or actually fishing or whatever. It's not like running an insurance company or, something a little more corporate that someone doesn't want to actually pay for, or someone doesn't actually want to talk about.
Or has any passion for.
Or has any passion for. We want to take a step back a little bit. Brian has a question, and I have a question too.
I have this question.
Okay, you can ask that one.
So back on the podcast and fishermen in general. So I think Anthony said it, but there's this like stigma. There's this like, you don't want to put yourself out there too much if you're doing well or whatever. We kind of got
not even if you're doing well, you don't want to put yourself out there. Like you don't want to, like, if you're not doing well, people are like, why are you putting, like, why are you doing this? You have no credibility. And if you're doing well, people are like, well, you're doing well, you're just bragging about it.
Now they're jealous.
Yeah. I think the podcast eliminates that. I think it's one of the mediums that, for content that eliminates that. Like generally speaking, you guys can agree, disagree, but every person that we ask to be on is 1000% invested in being on. And I think that's because it helps eliminate that stigma. They get to be authentic. They get to tell their story, that people might be jealous of them because they're out there 200 days a year and, slay the fish, and other guys that don't have that opportunity talk shit. And then they listen to them actually talk and have a conversation and understand that they're a normal human being and they're just fishing hard. Like it's as simple as that. I think the podcast helps people realize that.
Yeah. And I think money has a lot to do with it too. People that may not be as fortunate as someone else with money, and they see them in, say, a big sport boat or a big down east boat or whatever, and they're going out and doing stuff and catching fish, and it's just, maybe they say, oh, it's just daddy's money or whatever. And what it comes down to is they're working their ass off in the back end. They're able to actually tell their story. They're able to tell like how their company grew, how many hours they put into it. They're able to actually tell their life leading up to the point of their, it's all success, but leading up to the point that they're able to
failure.
Yeah. Leading up to the point,
a lot of failure
to do something, that other people can easily just put a name on, when in reality, they're able to now tell their story. And I feel like it evens the playing field.
Agreed.
It's kind of like,
just humanizes the person, like you see, like, it's like one of those things where you don't want to meet your heroes. Like I remember, thinking of like, we haven't had Rich Barrett from the Shark Bite on yet, but like I got to know him just by happenstance, but not everybody gets to know him. Somebody might think that he's just snobby guy that runs a freaking badass boat that travels the world and does things because of the way, he handles himself. He's he's a humble guy, quiet, but if you ask him for anything, he'll give you anything, any help you need, any part you need, or any sort of tip you need to be successful. He's like an open guy. Like, you just have to ask him, and I feel like like you said, the podcast kind of lets people in that space without actually like having to walk up and ask the person, so
Right. Yeah.
and I think it does humanize them a little bit, because people don't, some people had a tough road. A lot of people had a tough road to wherever they're at, if they're any sort of successful.
Yeah. I think what I at least from my viewpoint, what I really see in social media, because I guess it's the advantage that I think that I have as someone who runs the company, that I also run the pages. I see and communicate with everyone, right? And I feel like the one thing that I see a lot, and I've spoken to Ricky Wheeler about this, is that people on social media always want to like outsmart someone. Because that comment section is so toxic. I'll give you an example. I can make a video about a drop back, right? I think everyone kind of knows how that works with the free spool and all the thing, and you let it eat and all that, right? And it will be an awesome video, and the intent would be pure to kind of teach people to help someone catch more fish or be better, right? But then be in the comments section, you have some guys be like, but you should be doing it this way, and this is wrong, and this is that. And like, it's just the self-promotion comes with the critics from people on the sidelines who are not actually trying to help. I think that's kind of what separates people who do it for the right reasons. Like, as long as your intent is good and you're trying to kind of help people through educational things or through self-promotion or whatever it may be, or through inspiration, it's a big thing as well, then that's a net benefit to society. And that always gets matched with people who want to give their opinions, but they're never the Jimmy Davids. That's never the Rich Barretts that are out here saying, you're not doing this right, and what if a fish goes down? No, it's always the guys who are kind of in that inexperienced, kind of learning what they know, that immediately bring people down and are like, oh, you didn't do this right, or whatever, or what if it's this scenario? Then you know what I mean? It's a weird place, and I sometimes struggle with it, because we put out content to help people, and I get it that sometimes to someone who maybe knows better or sees a different scenario could come and put their comments in and whatever. But at the same time, I feel like I call it net promoting yourself has a lot of benefit and definitely outweighs any types of criticism that one can get. That's the way I see it.
You're gonna
even if you have bad comments,
you're gonna filter your listeners. You're gonna filter your audience to the people that you are trying to reach.
Yeah.
And I feel like
I love.
Go ahead.
I just was going back to Leo's comment section. I just love, even if they're bad comments, I love them. It's just so entertaining to me sometimes.
And it's always the bad commenters.
Any sort of good debate in the comment section, especially about fishing, I'm in on it.
Yeah, I want to go a little bit back, just to kind of go over Billfish a little more, and then we can get into some fishing stuff. But you guys have some badass clothing, and this is from an outsider looking into like your site and everything else. Can you kind of go over briefly like how you started with the apparel and what you guys actually do with that side of things? And then you do other things just besides the podcast as well that maybe you could talk about.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. I'll talk a little bit about Billfish, and then I'll give it to Anthony as well, because Anthony's the co-host of the pod, and he represents Hook Optics. So, Anthony, if you want, you can obviously give your story as well. Yes. So with Billfish, go ahead, Anthony. What you were saying?
No, I was just saying thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the Billfish backstory is, it's a pretty wild story, honestly, and it's very hard to put it in a very short timeline because there's just so much involved. But basically, it started as a sport fishing page for my family's boat, and as it got a little bit traction, back then it was Fala Me Sport Fishing that was big, and they were kind of doing their thing with the chef and the food and everything, and that inspired me to go make posts and whatnot. And then as it started to grow, I shifted it as a sport fishing page, shifted it to like a magazine, because back then was Marlin magazine was the thing. They still are awesome, don't get me wrong, but there wasn't like a social media version of like a magazine, and that was the kind of the initial plan, to be like a news outlet. So he started doing Billfish like fishing reports, similar to what Hook does on billfishreports.com. We started doing something like that, but then with photos and videos, and started getting traction. And then we started with the apparel like 2 years later when we were at 60,000 followers. And that was just a hobby, just to play around with things. Because we just thought that, again, just like everything, like in hindsight, you can look at Billfish and you see the end result right now, right? But as you can imagine, it's all phases. It's not like one big step and you wake up with this idea and a master plan. It's you navigate it as you go. So one of the steps that was there was, again, step one was we created a magazine. That was kind of the idea, like an online magazine. Then we noticed, all right, you know what? Let's start doing apparel. So we started playing around with head hats and stickers, and then we reinvested all the profits. Then we started doing shirts, and then we did hoodies, and we've just always been reinvesting throughout that process. And it's just a wild story, man. Like it's very different than most companies. So I funded all myself. I didn't have like parents that gave me money or anything like that. So we just started with stickers and we reinvested those profits and put it all back, and we made hats. And these are all FlexFit hats back in the day, right? And we shipped out of a guy I never met in person. Or actually, I met him one time, Chris Alvarez in Selfish Marine in Palm Beach, and he's still a good dude. And he shipped stuff for free for like a year and a half. Then he kind of got fed up with it. I had to figure something out. And I reached John Allen, who's a customer of ours at that time, who I've never met. And I was like, hey, John, we need help. It seems like you have time on your hands. Can you help with shipping? He's like, yeah, man, I'm a fan of the brand. Let's do it. And I just shipped everything to John Allen, like, I don't know, at the time, $2,000 worth of inventory. And then he started shipping stuff out of Okeechobee for us for like a good 2-year span. And that's why I'm going back to my previous point about how there's good people in this industry. That's an example of one. People who you can just trust to help you, and you give them free gear or some other kickback, and they just help, right? Because they believe in the mission. And so we did that. And then Nicholas Eid, another guy, helped us out for like 2 years as well. And that really kind of helped build the foundation of it all. And then through that period, we kind of figured out manufacturing a little bit. And that's kind of in a nutshell how it went down. There's so many details to it. And we should do like a podcast about it to really go more in depth. But yeah, fast forward many years later, we hired someone who was an expert at manufacturing and got us into a legit operating factory. And that really helped us out a lot. It took a lot of investment from our end financially, but it worked out. And yeah, just a quick story. And as far as the mission goes, there wasn't really I didn't feel like there was an apparel brand that people were really, that was transparent to people. Like there back then, and there was the pelagics, the Hucks and whatever, but like I felt like there needed to be a brand that was really by a fisherman for a fisherman. When you knew that like the founder can go and fucking tie his own bimini knot and stuff like that. And I had no idea who the founder of Bluefin is. No clue what they even do. They might be people in suits. I have no idea. You know what I mean? Like, so I felt there needed to be someone who's, you know, at the White Marlin Open, at Los Sueños, at these tournaments, who kind of is respected, that could build a brand. And I just thought, you know, let's give it a shot. Back then, everyone was wearing like the boat builder shirts. So I just thought, you know what, it'd be cool to do a real fishing line that was made by fishermen and for fishermen. And we have a tagline. We say, we help fishermen catch fish, not look like one. and, you know, that is kind of has always been like our North Star, which is like, we don't want to be people be covered in mahi prints. Like, no more mahi prints, please. Like, it's fine. Like, we get it, you know? Let's do more thumb holes and more drawstrings and other cool, innovative ideas to help people, that actually helps people, more technical fabrics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's it for me. I can go on and on, but that's for a different podcast. Anthony, go ahead with Hook Optics.
we kind of at the beginning of COVID, my parents and my brother are in the optical business. They have optical stores, and I kind of was never really a big part of that operation. And then my mom was kind of having a meltdown during COVID, as like everybody was, because it was the end of retail, right? We have 3 retail spaces, brick and mortar retail spaces. So my mother, as she does, she's an incredible woman, but she has her meltdowns, and then when she has these panic attacks, she goes on a mission, and like she had one of these fears that, like Leo, like you once said to me, Leo, if you're not growing, you're dying. And she was like, we're gonna die if we don't, like, we're not gonna have a business. And we're not, it's a good business, but we're not running around on 64-foot sport fishers like I'm fortunate enough to run. So it was a necessity. And so my mom was like, she got us together and said, we're starting a sunglass business. And that's where we went. And we'd spent like a year kind of researching the lenses and building our relationship with Zeiss that we've been using for our lenses, and kind of trying to figure out what the best lens for fishing in different types of water was. And that's where we're at now. And then, we've started the company, and Leo and Billfish have been a huge help to us. I can't thank them enough for, doing the pod, and going to Miami was awesome. And, now we have like a little notoriety, going places, and like we sponsored the La Sueña series, and, people knew about us before we got there. And I saw in Miami, I saw how big that was with how successful Leo and the team were there. So yeah, we just started that, and, we've been in it 3 years, and we finally have a few styles that are rolling, and we just try to help people fish a little bit better. Like Leo says, we think we're just trying to help people fish and try to do better out there fishing, and have a good, reliable product, try to stand behind it a little bit.
And the Mahi Prince. And the Mahi Prince.
The name of this episode.
Yeah, episodes is going to be no Mahi.
No more Salt Life stickers, please. It's fine. We get it.
Oh, that's funny. Let's talk fishing.
Yeah.
That's great. No, great entrepreneurial stories where, similar boat, and always appreciate to hear how it all began and what it's become. So
it's good too, because there's people that I'm sure that, like we were just talking about, that look at you, see you with a Hook Optics shirt on, and they think that maybe you're just working there, or maybe they think who knows what. There's all these opinions because they see you on social media, and now your story has been told. So you're back to ground zero.
Yeah. I don't know if we've ever left ground zero.
Love it. All right, fishing boys. You got one you want to ask first?
Ask one. I think we should do a couple rapid fire ones. Maybe do it for both of them.
All right.
See what their gut instinct is.
All right. How about we do? I have one right off the
go
rip.
for it.
For Anthony as a captain, for Leo as an angler, worst big fish loss, one that you will never forget.
I'll let Anthony go first. I gotta think about this one.
Or like, it doesn't have like big meaning money, big meaning size, big meaning, the moment was intense and you just,
or maybe you just saw the fish and the fish didn't even eat.
Exactly.
Blue marlin that you saw.
I guess I'll do two. I'll do one really quickly and one in kind of in a little bit more detail, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So, the first year I worked on the Blood Money, the owner was running the boat and I was the mate, and we hooked a blue marlin on a dink, like a dink rod of 20, and it was like a marginal, like it was in the mid-Atlantic 500,000. It was the last day, and it was like a marginal. It would have been close to for it to make weight, right? And we fought that thing for like 6 hours.
Wait for that tournament's 400, right?
Yeah, I believe it's something like, it's not as big as the White Marlin Open. So, and we just never could quite get with a fish like that, even a 400 pounder or close to it, the last couple little bit, you got to pull it to the boat, right? And with 60-pound leader for white marlins, like it just didn't happen. And I was fingertipping it, and I was like, man, we were just running out of time. The sun was going down. It was like 6:15. We were gonna have to run faster than we normally cruise to get home, and I finally just pulled it and popped it off. And in hindsight, it wasn't a heartbreaker, because now knowing what I know now, I don't think that fish was big enough. So it would have been close. I don't feel that bad about it, but it was like 6 hours, and you're looking, and there wasn't a big fish on the board. So, it was a long time. Dude. We did, like, I don't know if you guys do a lot of numbers bill fishing, but like you try to circle up. The fish ate the long rigger, and we did 2 circles around it. We renegotiated all the lines so we did 2 circles around it, and we'd just go to start spinning, and this like blue marlin starts jumping, because we didn't see the bite. We just thought it was a white marlin. So, and then we just like kind of and we're like, I was like, fuck. Because inevitably in every year between the 2 big tournaments we have in Ocean City, Mid-Atlantic and the White Marlin Open, this happens to somebody, and it never ever works out. Never. Like my whole goal now is, if that happens, it's just to ram the fish and hope we don't break the bill off or mutilate it, and then just hope for the best, and then turn around and gap it as fast as we can. And then the other one, which I was like, was really cool, which wasn't, I think we got the release, but we didn't get a good look at it, was we hooked a blue marlin up in the Hudson Canyon when that really crazy white marlin fishing was going on, 2018, I think. And we ran up there from Ocean City, like 150 miles, doing overnighter. And we had like marginal white marlin fishing. I think we were like 7 for 14, 16 for the 2 days that we spent there. And which was good. It's great fishing, but it wasn't like it was a couple days before that, where it was like 20, 30 bites a day. Yeah. And one of the mates, who's a captain of a boat called the Top Dog, used to work for me. One of the guys that rode along with us for the thing was like, man, I can't believe we haven't seen a big blue marlin. And I'm like, man, in all my years in good white marlin fishing, I never seen a big blue marlin in amongst these white marlins. And it wasn't like 5 minutes later, this fucking thing comes paddling on the long rigger. And one of our anglers, our regular anglers, Donnie Moore, was on the long rigger, and I'm like, just feed it. Like, he's right there. He's gonna eat it. And he's like, nope. He was on a different boat a couple weeks before and chafed off like a 400 pounder on 60. So he popped the long rigger out and teased the fucking thing all the way to the back to the pitch bait. And they, like, the first bite, the fish went to go eat the pitch bait and got him crossed up. And somehow we managed to get him untangled, and the thing smoked it again. And we hooked him on a 50 with 400 pound. And I was like, man, that's a nice one. I was like, that's all right. And we were backing up. I never really jumped until we got like on it. And then it started jumping, and I was like, holy shit. And I don't know how big it was. I'd call it 700, probably the biggest one I'd ever seen. It could have been 650. It could have been 1,000, because I don't fucking know. So,
yeah, I know, right?
All I know is we were a mile from Walter Hammerstead on the Going In Deep, and he goes, man, that's a fucking big one. And I was like, as he said it on the radio, I was like, all right, that's cool. So we got up on it. We got a good jump out of it, like probably 80 to 100 feet off the transom, and we got a good video of it. And then I finally get up on it, and this is the first year we had this boat. So I'm like kind of being more aggressive than I should have been. And the fish kind of does a U. He starts jumping on the starboard side, and he jumps all the way around, and he jumps into the dredge and under the boat. And I remember hearing this. And the dredge was caught in the main line and was getting pulled under the boat. And I heard the rap, and we saw the blood, and I'm like, and they had the gaffs out because my crew is insubordinate and they'll just want to kill everything. I was like, I don't want to kill it. But they were like, it's huge. So they had the gaffs out, and I was like, oh, well, I ran it over, and it broke off under the wheel, and it just sunk to the bottom. And I just felt bad because we never really got a good look at the fish. And if you're not going to kill the fish, you'd like to see it swim away, and that was like the worst of both worlds because like you killed it. I'm pretty confident I killed it. You never know, but you know, we after that we didn't really get a good look at it. That was kind of heartbreaking and frustrating. If I had that back, I wouldn't drive like an asshole, or I would drive differently like an asshole because that's how I drive.
Drive like a different asshole.
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah, 'cause I know. Yeah, that July we went from the 56 Viking that really maneuvered really well as far as spinning and then this boat that kind of didn't spin as well as that boat did.
Does it have the tunnel holes?
The Viking did, this boat doesn't.
Then it should maneuver better, right? Because it doesn't have the tunnels that that doesn't, because the tunnels make it go faster but doesn't change direction as easily, correct?
Yeah, the propellers are smaller on this boat than that boat was for some reason, and it's the same. It's just a little bit wider, but it's 8 feet longer than the Viking was. So like when I went to go spin it, like I wanted to spin it, it didn't spin the way I was like kind of, and that was the first situation I'd ever been with this boat. Now I would just know to just pull away from it as it starts to freak out. I'll just pull away from it, let it do its thing. But you know, that was just
why we have one propeller.
Yeah.
And it cuts our chances in half.
And a keel.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
a heartbreaker. That's a good one though. I like.
Yeah,
that's a great story to share because so many are about victory or never saw it, and
that's
people don't think of stuff like that. It happens so fast, especially with those things. Like their tail is so fucking big they can change direction in like almost the length of their body. It's insane.
It is amazing looking at the tail. We're doing some blue marlin tails right now, finishing them up for people with our other side of the business, along with bluefin tails. And like we have one I believe is right around 500 and one's like 400, and they're like twice the size of a bluefin tail. I mean, lengthwise,
really?
Not depth. Oh yeah. I mean, I should put a picture up. So we have a couple grander tails that we're doing, or at least 900 pluses, and then the blue marlin tails, and they're like twice the width almost.
Absolutely designed for utility. Bluefin tail is designed for raw power, straight line speed.
Yeah.
It's cool. Pretty wild to see.
How about you, Leo? Any mahi pants stories?
No, I usually burn those. No. No, for me, the most heartbreaking story was the one that actually ended up working out. That was the Los Sueños win in Costa Rica. It's like the most competitive bait fishing tournament ever. You were sitting in first place, and we were just some gun-ho guys from the Caribbean who like we're not Ronnie Fields or like Rich Barrett. Like we're just some random guys who fished together, and we were fit, and we were sitting in first place until like 2 p.m. Which is wild. So like we were like right there, and like just for context, like because you have a lot of Northeastern guys who listen to this. You're in a cockpit, you're catching a fish. What would you say, Anthony? Like every 45 seconds?
It depends. Like the unique thing about Los Sueños is there's a 50-mile boundary, and they put the radio antenna on the top of a mountain, so you can hear everybody calling in a fish pretty much everywhere. Yeah. Even if you can't hear the boat, maybe that you're competing against, you can hear Ashley on the radio say so-and-so caught 2 sails, or so-and-so caught a marlin. And so you're like, when you're fishing, you're like hearing that, and you're like, the tension is kind of ratcheted up because of that you know where you're at, and you're close.
That would get.
But like like the top boats are catching, like 30 sails a day. Like, and back then, now it's more of a marlin thing. But like, so like it's nonstop, right? So like, even sure you have the top 5 boats which are worried out, but there's 40, and they're all catching them. So the radio is just nonstop. So you're sitting there in first place, and Uno Mas is behind you, Big O's behind you. So whenever you hear that radio go on, you're like, you shake a little bit, So at 2 p.m. we're just, and how these tournaments goes, like there's certain periods where like you just get them, and certain periods where it's just slow. And I remember it was like at 2 p.m. and I think Lanza was like, was it at 4? And at 2, things just slowed down and nobody was catching them. And we're sitting in first, we're up by like 1 fish. And you hear all of a sudden there you go, and you're like, oh, who is this? And you're like, oh wait, they're not at top 10, we're good. So you're literally just waiting there, like, what's gonna happen? And towards the end, I think, Uno Mas made a run, and this was when the Omnis, I'm not sure if your followers know that, but it's like a sonar that costs $135,000 that scans crazy well, and you can see exactly where the fish are. You can literally track it and follow it. Back then, it was 2019. It wasn't a thing. The guys like on the Done Deal in like West Coast Florida, like they were doing it and stuff, but it didn't hit mainstream yet. And Uno Mas had it, and another boat called another Spencer had it, whatever. And like they found the fish, man, and they were just yanking them one by one by one by one. And we're there like, oh my God, we're gonna lose. And we jumped to second. I'm like, shit. And we're fishing next to Big O, and like literally we're trolling, and everyone's all eyes back. Like, I kid you, everyone's looking back, and all of a sudden, like, what? 10 feet to the right of us, you see Big O just pass us in reverse. And we're like, oh my God, they just released a fish next to us. Damn, we're tied for second. And then they catch another. And this is when I first saw a boat with that sonar, because you're fishing next to that smooth move rope boat, the red thing.
Yep.
And they were trolling like very weird. So you can clearly see something's going on. And the captains of the city is like, yo, something up there. They're doing something that we're not aware of. And anyways, that's where I first learned about that sonar. And then all of a sudden, like, I think we were down to third. And that's when we were all like, oh man, like we don't know what's going on. We shut off the radio. We didn't know what was happening. And then when at lines out, like we didn't catch a single fish. Like it was just nothing. And everyone was heartbroken because we thought we were fourth. Like it was really bad. Like we were really down. And I remember it was lines out and Ashley was going to do the thing. And like I almost threw up. I was legit terrified. Like I kid you not. Because again, I'm not like, sure, I fished around the world and I've done the stuff, but like, I'm not on the max bet. Like, I'm not on Big O. Like, I've these guys have done it for many, many, many years and have seen it all, right?
But you were there with your guy, and they were
with my guy. It was a big deal, right? So I was like, damn, so close. And they're announcing top 3. And when they get to the third, we're actually third place. Because I was fishing with my uncle and he was like, no, we're fourth. So the vibe was fourth place.
Yeah.
And then when they announced third, we all just I cried. The captain cried. It's all on YouTube. It's called Winning in Costa Rica.
And you guys struggled. Well, you guys struggled. Like you guys had like a progression in the series, right? That was the last leg, right?
Yeah. The entire series we sucked. Like last place on everything, and then somehow last leg we just made it happen. So it was just the most amazing feeling, and I hope it will happen again one day. But it's bleak because these guys are so good. I mean, Anthony, you know exactly how that's like. But yeah, it was awesome. So it ended up working out. It wasn't a heartbreak, but it was the most emotional roller coaster of it all. And so that's what I would put as, I guess, my most emotional moment on the water.
Yeah.
You can check it out on YouTube. It's really, really cool. It's called Winning Costa Rica. And as far as heartbreak goes, I'll just give a shout out to all my light tackle fishermen who fish 30-pound, who get yellowfin tunas in the line, and they go down deep, and you fight for 5 hours, and you lose it. Everyone is happy. It's happened to everyone, and it never gets better. So shout out to my people who struggle with those yellowfin tunas. It's the worst. The worst.
Did you buy an Omni sonar after that?
No, that's so expensive.
Let's talk about that for a minute. I don't know if it might be a touchy subject, but what are you guys' thoughts on those in tournaments?
Works really fucking well.
I know it works really well.
Push the button, the thing goes down, and you're like,
let me take one little step back first. So just for like someone who may not know what they're aware of, or someone who is totally opposed to, advanced technology fishing, you still need to fucking find the fish.
Oh yeah, you got to know how to use your
need
technology.
to fish. It's an excellent tool, and it's incredible, but like you need to be experienced to make it work,
Yeah.
if you want, we have one in this boat. So
Yeah,
we've
go
had
through
it.
all
And
the
we were, So basically, the Furuno Omni, the CSH8L, is a side scanning sonar that's been around for a while, but like Leo said, the Done Deal and a boat on the Northeast called the what was it called? The Going in Deep were the first two to have it, and the Done Deal on the Gulf Coast, and they kind of kept it really quiet. And I found out about it when we had the Viking. Furuno had like a little showing after the White Marlin Open on the Going in Deep, and I was like, what the fuck is that? And they were like, I was like, oh, it's just a side scanning sonar, because people have had the Searchlight for a while, and nobody really liked it because it took about a minute and a half, maybe a minute to a minute and a half to scan a 360, right? Well, and it has moving parts as in the transducer. The Omni is basically a transducer about that big, and it has no moving parts in the transducer other than it dropping down out of the bottom of the boat, and it pings at 1,000 feet. It pings a ping every half second. So like if you're driving along and you can paint a target like 1,000 feet, I can paint a single white marlin no problem on a nice calm day, or even on a rough day, like 1,000 feet over to my right, and I'll just turn that way. And you got to do a couple things, but you got to it certainly helps. And is it an advantage? It's absolutely an advantage. I would say it's an easy 20 to 25%. On some days it's way more than that, depending on the way the conditions are, like whether it be offshore yellowfin tuna fishing or big eye fishing or marlin fishing in the canyons. It's an advantage, and I don't know what to tell people. Like fishing's never been and this might be snobbery coming from a guy who runs a boat with it. It's never been fair. Like going to compete against the boats that, like Ocean City, there's probably a half dozen, eight boats that go to Costa Rica every winter, and another probably 6 or 7 boats that go other places, and then all the tournament boats that come and go, that go and travel and fish and practice and then come back up to the Northeast. They don't miss fish, so it's never been, for me, my justification is it's never been fair, but it's what I say, it's a technological advantage, that's for sure. But if you're in the middle of nowhere in the wrong spot, it ain't going to help you. Yeah,
and things will evolve.
But when you're in the right,
later down the line, there's going to be items that are cheaper that will do the same thing. It's going to take years.
I hope so. Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, I know,
like looking at LPs, like how many people had LPs, 10 years ago, and now look, you can't even fish a tournament without an LP for billfish, or not even LP, an electric reel in general.
I remember when I first started fishing, the dredge fishing stuff was starting to really come into play in Ocean City. And I remember I worked on a 56 Viking, it was pretty new. My captain was so reluctant to be like, buy 2 crystals, like 12-volt crystals to help us do better, because he thought they were crazy expensive, and now it's like, well, there's freaking $25,000 worth of dredge reels, before you even look in the engine room about what's going on down there. Yeah. So I don't know, man. It's just crazy. I mean, you got to think about how fortunate we are to, even the way this country, I don't know, people say it's gone bad, which it might be now, but the last 10 years in this industry has been fucking wild, and the expansion of technology and the resources that people are willing to throw at this shit anymore. I think it's mind blowing,
Really,
when guys are shipping, guys are shipping their boats $60,000 each way.
I mean, even communication, for example. I remember back in the day, when we were doing the Costa Rica thing, I remember some boats would go as far as putting Japanese radios in their boats, so you can go to like
Yazoo,
frequencies. Yeah. The Yazoo, so you can go to frequencies that other boats don't have, so you could talk to them, right? But now there's Garmin InReach, I think that's what it's called, and you just keep talk through text. That's not that's a new thing, and that's another one that's like very innovative.
Yeah, and the Starlink now too, which is
sick.
Right version, it's relatively affordable, and you can use that for a lot of things. Like my biggest thing, I like to chase conditions is my style of fishing. So like having the Starlink to be able to be like, oh look, the water's moved from here to here in 12 hours. Cool. I'm just gonna go there.
Yeah, you're gonna be able to see like real time when where the good water is. So yeah, it's wild. As far as the Omni thing, I don't know, man. I focus on having a really good guy upstairs like Anthony, and I'll make sure to try not to miss fish downstairs, and that's kind of all I can't speak too much about the Omni because it's just not my scope. As far as just personal opinion on the fact that you have to pay to have the better machines to do it. Look, I do think it's a shame that like, it has to be that way. Because it's a lot of money. It's $135,000. Like you can't, it's not even like worth a stretch. Like, dude, it's like more than certain center consoles, it's very tough. But yeah, I am happy though. I will say this. I'm happy that some tournaments now have divisions where they have like the Omnisnor division and the non-Snor division. That I guess makes it all right. I think that's really fair. I think that's a good solution to it. I'm more interested to hear kind of from you guys, like what has that impacted your world at all? Is that a thing up in the Northeast?
Slowly.
On a tune, because on a tuna boat, I can imagine, it's expensive for a tuna boat.
It doesn't, and before you guys started, it does not work very well in water less than 300 to 400 feet.
Yeah, right. That's our saving grace.
But there are technical, other pieces of technology you can upgrade to increase your success in shallow water, which we can talk to too. But the Omni, you're going canyon fishing, our local canyon tournaments, it's 1,000,000%.
Starting to make a difference. Yeah. And there's not, our tournaments are probably a little bit smaller as far as the size of boats. But some of these tournaments you guys are talking about, it's very mixed, anywhere from 30-foot center consoles to, 75-foot sport fish boats. And it's everywhere in between. So when you start getting more towards the, only 50 footers and bigger are fishing it, that's where the sonar is really going to be changing the game. Right now, only a few guys have it, and I think they're really just kind of getting used to using it. But my guess is the next 3 years, it's going to be required to really win a lot of money up here. And I know like some of the other tournaments just south of where we live, there's guys using it that are making some money using it. I do want to ask, I guess, one question, kind of going back when you were talking about your story of like circling around billfish. Brian and I have done it, but for those listening that may not billfish as much, what would you give for advice for getting on blue marlin, specifically on light gear? Like maybe how to keep blue marlin up. I know you can't control them, but there are little tricks and things with fighting blue marlin, especially on lighter gear, to help some of these guys in the Northeast that are going to the canyons. Because what's happening for us is, as there's so many bigger blue marlin mixed in with like these schools of yellowfin and big eyes and stuff. Like a small one is 400 a lot of times. We see many in the 500 to 800 pound range. And, most guys are fishing 30s and 50s and 80s, but there are, those times that you're fishing smaller gear, trying to get whites and
mixed spreads, so like, and I've experienced that getting blue marlins on smaller gear, even 30s, some of these really big fish that I feel like if you don't get a release quickly, you're done. The thing's going down and you're having to put all your drag on them. But maybe not. Maybe there's little tricks that you've seen that might help people listening, to get a quicker release on these fish. Because it can, I feel like it could be 15-minute fight, or it could be a 4-hour fight, 6-hour fight on the same gear.
Yeah. For me, there is a couple ways. Like we do a lot of light tackle, circle hook fishing, 60 pound, and we catch, I would say we catch the majority of blue marlins on that 60 pound. Now, when I say catch, we get the release and we might get a jump out of them at the boat, and that's kind of it. Ideally you'd like to pitch them like a 50. I think you're a lot of times it's not so much the reel that you're fighting against, it's the leader, and it's not so much the reel and the main line, it's so much the leader. Like 100-pound fluoro on a 400-pound fish on a J hook is a little bit more scary than 400 on the circle hook. You know what I mean? Because you're kind of dealing with that. But as far as like trying to catch them, what you can do with the boat, I guess, is what you're asking, and techniques with the angler.
You think about immediately. So say one eats the long rigger, already has a lot of line out, and he's jumping away.
Yeah.
Kind of that like watch your spool because it's going to be gone soon scenario.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is obviously get clear. If it's a blue one right away, like get cleared up and get after it and try to, they all do different things when you hook them. A lot of them jump around in circles or whatever. But I think what happens, what people make a big mistake, and what we made a big mistake in that mid-Atlantic fish years ago, was when the fish got down in a kind of a pattern about where, and understanding what needed to go on there. And that was, for the majority, I've seen this in Central America, and I've seen this on the East Coast. And the only time I really haven't seen it is the DR. They will pick a direction and they'll swim that direction, typically offshore. It's kind of crazy. I've seen them swim west in Central America, and I've seen them swim east in on the East Coast of the United States, right? In the DR, they kind of swim in circles, maybe because they don't have a big landmass or structure to orient themselves with. But after they do their thing, you'll get in a pattern, right? They'll get in a pattern, typically swimming offshore. My first go-to is to get up on them. And actually, if I have a guy that, and this involves the angler a lot too, if I can get the guy in the corner of the boat standing up, ideally, so he's standing in the back corner of the boat, and I'm actually backing the fish beyond backing the boat beyond the fish. And my first attempt, once they get down deep, is to just kind of pump and wind them up. So basically, I get the boat up in front of them and apply as much drag as I'm comfortable with, depending on the leader, and try to basically pump and wind them up, 6 inches or a foot at a time. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to get the boat ahead of them, so I'm pulling their head up towards me, so I'm planing them up a little bit.
Yeah.
Like that. So ideally, like pump and wind. And, with heavier tackle, even at 50 and 220, a lot of the times the fish will succumb and it'll just end up laying next to the boat, right? With the lighter stuff, like if he's coming, but he's not like really coming and it's kind of a stalemate, I'll do a couple different things. And I learned this from Victor Julio on the Tranquilo in Costa Rica. Like if we're going this way, and we're in front of them, I'll spin in front of them. I'll spin actually, and I'll go and I'll do a big loop in front of them, and like pull way, way, way out in front of them. And you're losing line the entire time, right? This is a tactic more like if you're hooked like a 400 pounder on a 30. Yeah. And so I'll basically do a loop, and I'll stop like a 3/4 loop, and I'll stop. And I'll just point the boat at the fish, and I'll just wait. And I don't know if it drags the line over his eye or just releases the pressure enough for him to come up, but they tend to come up if you do that. And it sometimes I don't know if it's correctly or not, because it's such a weird scenario. Every scenario is so different. But sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times to do it, and they just come up, like they'll just come up jumping, and you can get them. Like if you place the boat enough to head them off, like they'll come in jumping a lot closer than if you just wait. And if you wait, they'll come up, but they'll come up a long ways away, and the boat doesn't go that fast, Yeah. So I try to do a loop, and I'll wait for them to come up, and it's amazing how many times you can do that. But it all involves some sort of risk, But right. It's like, do you want to kill this fish? Do you want this fish to die on you, or do you want to get back to fishing? Like for us, like I just feel like I want to get this. I don't know. My favorite part is hunting the fish and seeing the fish, and getting the bites. So like the fighting is just put the flag on the rigger, Yeah. But I also want to accomplish what we set out to do. So those 2 tactics, especially the get in front of them and pump and wind them up, is something once you notice that they get in the pattern swimming a certain direction, you can really make some headway if you have a good angler, or a low gear. Like if you don't have a good angler, if you can just put the rod and put the reel in low gear and kind of wind them up, that can help too.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip for people. Like up here, there's so much concentration on tuna. Tunas, you can more or less just bump the boat around, just stay away from them, and then at the end, virtually dead boat the fish.
Yeah.
So like when it comes to billfish, I feel like most people may not be quite as aggressive as what you just said. They're staying behind the fish, and the fish, they always want the fish swimming away. They're afraid to change angles because they're afraid that the fish is going to go under the boat, which is always the risk that you were just saying you take.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I've done exactly what you're saying on a couple blue marlin now, and it's totally worked. And it's the most awkward thing ever if you've never done it, to basically that the fish is swimming away to get beside the fish and back down beyond the fish, and the angler is almost like pointed, not even really perpendicular to the boat, but slightly towards the bow, and you're just slowly planning them up. And same thing, I've had to like go to the other side. We did it in a tournament a few years ago, going to the other side of the fish, but you're saying going actually in front of them to the other side, which totally makes sense.
It's kind of something that just in that circumstance, it's just kind of something to annoy them, to try to change that pattern. You can either work with the pattern that you're in, where they're just swimming offshore, or you can try to fuck with them a little bit and kind of get them to make a mistake, as they say.
The mistake is where you're going to get your leader shot.
Yeah. I guess the first what I would add to that as well is just get the release quick.
Yeah.
You said something about the turn, right? I think what you're referring to, when you said something about the long rigger, which one did you refer to, like left rigger or right long rigger? Like
either one, really. I mean, Brian and I both had the scenarios where they eat close or long, and they come either at you or dead away from you.
I mean, the main course of action comes to that. Anthony, if you can, please fill me in, because you're much more experienced than I am. But from what we always do is, let's just say you get a blue marlin bite on like the right long rigger, and the fish decides to turn port. Then what you do is you either take your right flat, send it to the long, and you fish your long as well, turning to that fish, or you take your left long, shift to the right long, and then take the other flat, put it to that long, and you fish and you kind of go towards that fish looking for double header, right? But then as soon as you kind of figure out that's done, I guess the protocol is just try to get the release as fast as possible.
Yeah,
because the second you take too long, you're done. It's gonna dive and you're finished.
With you guys, typically you're up there fishing a more tuna spread, right? So it's kind of not an anomaly, but it's something that you're going to be fishing like 10 or 12 8 to 12 lines typically, right?
Yeah.
7 to 9 rods.
7 to 9 rods probably most common.
Plus teasers, that's what
Yeah.
So, like if we hook a blue, it's kind of like, oh, here we go, get everything out of the water.
Yeah. And I think in that
is heavy too, big spread of bars and stuff like that too.
I think in that instance, I mean, obviously the best way is to fucking clear up and get them as fast as you can. My example was more once you've realized that this ain't gonna happen in 15 minutes,
Yeah.
Anthony, we should do a podcast about just literally the art of the turn.
Yeah.
Because there's so much that goes on when you're looking for a doubleheader, and so much things you can do differently. Like I said before, you'll hook up on the left long, and what happens then? You'll take your right long, put it in the left long, put a new line here, and there's like a whole procedure there, and it's a very interesting thing. And some people do it differently than others. But as far as finding a fish, what?
That's one of my questions.
I'll let Anthony speak to that because I've done it a couple of times, but he's the captain. As far as fighting the fish goes, I probably would literally just echo and put an exclamation mark behind what Anthony said, because that is the protocol. Like as soon as the fish goes down, you put that thing on reverse. Like, let's just say it goes down C. You put your transom down C and you back up kind of ahead of the fish, and then you stand there awkwardly in that corner with that line facing your bow, and you just try to pump it up. And pray to God it comes up, because besides that, I
found that the fish in what I call island fisheries, the DR, the only island fishery I've ever been to is the DR, but I find that they don't get into that pattern as much as like in continental fisheries, I call it, where they have like a 100-fathom line to orient themselves with, or a coastline to orient themselves with. I feel like they do in the DR. They did fucking circles. It was fucking weird.
Ask Sean about
Yeah, we
why.
should ask Sean to see
See
they
if they
do
go
there.
deep towards the seamounts, or if they like when we hooked ours, they weren't huge, but there was really no.
I feel like Hawaii is weird too because it's such a steep drop.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind
Yeah,
of
and it's just out there.
And I want to swim back into the harbor. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Dion Children Foundation. The Dion Children Foundation was established by the Dion family as a way to bring awareness to rare and ultra-rare genetic diseases in children, such as limb-girdle muscular dystrophy, or LGMD. LGMD is a neuromuscular disease that causes progressive muscle weakness, leading to the loss of ambulation, and eventually affects the heart and lungs. Recently, the Dion family was faced with the heartbreaking news that their son Peter and daughter Maggie were diagnosed with LGMD and are battling this rare disease. The core belief at the Dion Children Foundation is that no child should be left behind. For more information or to donate to this incredible cause and family, please visit thedionfund.org. The Dion Foundation is also the official charity of the 2023 Nantucket Big Game Battle. So if you are fishing that event this summer, good luck and thank you so much for the support.
So back that's literally my next question. So obviously blue marlin and light gear, those are great tips. And then my next question was, with smaller billfish, white marlin, sailfish, fishing say 4, sometimes 5 smaller baits, chugger baits, or just all naked circle hook stuff. A white marlin, they come up in packs, sailfish come up in packs. Like what are you doing to capitalize on the fish you may or may not see? Leo just started going through it, and maybe both of you guys can kind of answer. But
Anthony, do you mind if I kind of take a stab at it and you can correct me where I'm wrong and kind of add more information to it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so basically the idea is, just say you're trolling, right? And you're fishing 4 lines, left flat, left long, right long, 2 dredges and 2 chains. So the let's just say you have a fish come up and bites the left long. What you want to do is you want to keep especially fishing your longs at all times. So let's just say a fish eats the left long and then turns starboard. What you then do is you'll either take your left flat, send it out, put it in that left long rigger. So you have 2 long riggers again to look for doubles. And you turn to that fish, which is heading starboard. So you turn your boat starboard. So you kind of troll alongside that fish's movement while fishing those 2 longs. And if all goes well, 2 flats as well. Right. And that's kind of how you try to capitalize it. I know some boats do like a S turn thing where they kind of keep going left and right to cover more ground as they approach that fish. And yeah, I think that's the procedure, right, Anthony? I don't know if there's stuff that other people do differently.
Every boat kind of does it a little differently. But the idea is just like to, like you said, capitalize on what opportunity you have and what may or may not be there, right? So the main thing is to maintain some sort of composure first, and then kind of if you're doing this to catch numbers like we like to do in Ocean City and in Central America, the idea is to keep as much of the spread in the water as possible to attract more bites, whether it be the pack of fish you just went over, or maybe you get lucky and you turn into another fish and you raise him. So like Leo said, if it's on the left long, you probably, like, I'll do it from a different sense. The left teaser, you pick one off the left teaser, you wind it up, the dredge is in the water or out of the water, the left teaser's out of the water. You're going to want to turn towards the fish, like Leo said, and then you want to renegotiate the lines however you can. If the 2 long riggers are out, sometimes if you hook one on the flat line, it's going to jump over the long rigger. But instead of just clearing the left long, if you hook it on the left long or the left flat, and he jumps over to the left long, instead of just clearing it rapidly, just pull down the long rigger and have the angler pop it out, walk under the angler that's hooked up, and put it back up in the rigger and run it up. And it kind of you need a team to do it, and you need to have been there. You don't need a team. Eventually you just need to try it if that's what you want to do, but for it to work well, you gotta have to have people that know what they're doing. But you have to start somewhere. So, try it. The main idea is to keep the art of the turn, I guess, would be like keeping as many lines in the water while still making progress on the fish you're catching, right? If it works out really well, you can have your lines in the water until you circle up and have the wider sail right under the rigger, and you can just back up and catch it real quick. Sometimes you need to clear up, sometimes you don't. But it's the art of, I guess the art of the turn is a great way to put it, Leo. But like the idea is
sometimes I have good catchy phrases. Yeah. That's a good one. I gotta write that one down.
That down.
I did.
I gotta write that down. The art of the turn. I gotta write that down.
So the idea is to keep as much in the water as far from the hook. Obviously, the hook baits are the most important because that's the way you're going to catch them, right? But if you can keep the teasers in the water and attract a fish that you might not attract without the teasers in the water, then that's fantastic too. So, and I have a process of how we clear things, right? So if we're in a port side turn, or a right side turn, as we call it, when we're looking back, we say right and left teaser, right? So if we're turning the boat to port, the teaser is going to come down and the mate's going to pin the teaser down as it comes in. And then the fish is going to jump over the long rigger, and we're going to renegotiate that, have the angler walk under, pull the long right, it would be the right long down, walk under the angler, put it back up, and send it back up in the rigger. And that maintains our right long and our left long, and say you got bit on the right flat, have the left flat angler kind of just walk over and get their bait in clean water. And then if we raise one on the left teaser, he can go over there. And depending how good you are and how many people you have, you can throw another flat line in the water. If the long rigger gets bit, like Leo said, and I'm gonna, in the same turn, except it's a long rigger bite, I'll take the inside flat line. I'll move the right long to the left long, I'll move the opposite rigger to the empty rigger, right?
Yep.
And then I'll take the opposite flat line, and with the way you're set up in the turn, the flat line on the inside of the turn, you can almost fire that back in complete free spool without getting tangled up, and throw it in the rigger. So you fire it back. When I say fire, like a complete dump, as the angler is putting it up in the long rigger, and then you come tight, and then you get the bait down there a little further than maybe. And then once you get back to your desired thing, you hold it with your thumb, and it brings it back to the surface. And it's amazing how many times you get that bite coming on that long rigger as it's coming up out of the water.
You guys are basically trying to emulate like the boat's attracting the fish, the dredge is attracting the fish. They come up, they grab the bait. It's like the bait ball kind of like popping apart. And then you're taking those trickle baits back in the water as those injured soldiers, whatever, that are out of that big mass. And then those both are coming up and cleaning up the garbage, so to speak.
Yep. And it's just all about keeping as much in the water as possible during that moment, because you've been searching all day for this. And then, I'm sure it was derived with people catching singles, and you clear up, and then next thing you know, there's 2 or 3 back there, and you're like, oh my God, you've been waiting all day for this one fish, and now it's turning into 3, and you can't capitalize. So yeah. And then as far as like clearing up, like I pull the dredges first, and then I try to if the dredge is coming in, I try to have a flat line go by the dredge and just hold it. And then once it goes by, hold it with your thumb, and then just kind of, as you're clearing up to go get the fish, just kind of wind in slowly as it's required. Sometimes on the long rigger, if the fish is getting close, the hooked fish is getting close to there, you kind of got to speed up so don't get tangled up. But the opposite long rigger, if the boat's turning towards the fish, the opposite long rigger can almost stay out there, because you're going to spin the boat away from that long rigger and go. And I try to get the guys to leave it out there if the situation lets it. But it's all like anything else is capitalizing on the opportunities, and whatever. We all have our own ways of doing it. I'm like a lot of guys in Costa Rica now will put, instead of having the opposite long rigger, they'll put 2 on the inside. They'll put a short and a long on the inside of the turn to have it in clean water. I don't necessarily agree with that, but boats have won tournaments like that,
What about
I'll add 2
anglers
things.
holding the long rigger rods? Is that a 100% at all times during fun fishing or tournament fishing, or is there downtime with that?
If you have staff.
If you have the staff, yeah. I fish on a boat that my anglers are super into it, and they do hold the long riggers. I will say, if it's slow fishing, if you're not holding the rod properly, then just put it down, because my uncle, I love my uncle. He's introduced me to everything that I've ever had in this industry, but he's a really good angler, but he can get bored and hold the rod wrong. And my guys, all my guys kind of do this. They'll be like, oh yeah, they'll be shooting the shit down there. And then next thing you know, like he's just like kind of holding it over the shoulder, hold it in free spool, and then he gets smoked on the long rigger, and you start to see the backlash coming. And a lot of times he can recover from that, but sometimes you don't. And then next thing you know, everybody's yelling backlash, and you're trying to get, he comes tight, and you're backing up, and next thing you know, another fish comes up. So like my policy is if the fishing's good and you're going to hold the rod properly and focus, then definitely hold the long riggers. On the flat lines, I don't necessarily think it's as important. They can be pinned down, and then just have somebody sitting there, Now, if I mark a fish, I'd like them to pick the rod up and be ready for it. You know what I mean?
Sorry to interrupt you, but what about on the turn with the flat lines? Like, say you have a fish come up on the, right long, you're having someone, as you're clearing, unpin a flat to like bring it over the dredge or over to the teaser and work.
Yeah, try to. Yeah, they do this thing in Stewart in South Florida called prospecting, where for sales or the Atlantic sales that are so kind of lazy sometimes, where they literally wind the bait up and drop it by the dredge the entire day, right? Wow. So, and that's basically emulating a bait fish falling off or a straggler falling off, and and whatever you want to base everything you do around the teasers and the dredges. The boat's the biggest teaser, and then the dredges, and then the baits, and the teasers, and then the baits, right? So once they've come to the area of the boat and they're focused on the dredges, you want to focus your bait on where they're at, so you can if there's one there down deep or something like that, you can drop a bait by and just associate everything, whether it be dropping a bait by, maybe you're not that confident in dropping the bait by, but just kind of holding the bait around the dredge. That's typically, if you hold a bait 20 30 feet behind the dredge and there's a fish there, he's going to find it. This is an Atlantic.
I will add one thing too. Like if your boat, for example, just say you're turning port, right? And you gotta take let's just say for some reason you have to take your right flat to the right long. You can't, because your boat's turning and everything right is kind of in the middle. What you then do is you cast over it. I've seen that. I do that as well. I see a lot of people do it as well. So you take your left flat bait, reel it up, cast it over your squid chain teaser, and you immediately send it to the clip, and you put it up, and that's how you kind of get it by. So I guess that's like a quick thing I'd add as well. Gotcha. I'd say two other things to what you said.
Can't do that on my boat.
Oh, because your riggers are too big? Because the riggers are too big and the squid chains are too wide?
No, just because we can't cast conventional. Oh. Like we've tried it. We've tried all that stuff, and it doesn't always work.
No, it doesn't always work. I'm saying, like, I try to do it. It usually goes all right, but yeah, it's definitely. I can
hear the sound of that in my head right now.
The rat's nest. I would do it. I would rat's nest.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I've seen it.
That takes practice. That takes practice.
Yeah.
When you have out there, when you have some really good mates.
Yeah, they got it. They got it like that.
Like Thomas Garvin on the Viking boat, he'll fire that. He'll just fucking fire a ballyhoo 40 feet and just hand it to somebody and pin it up, and you're like, what just happened?
We fished in Mexico. The mates in Mexico, the pitching and the casting they were doing with the conventional reels to the strike.
Yeah.
Man,
It's wild.
like, what? And you do it, it's a rat's nest sending the bait about 400 yards off the hook every single time.
When I was doing that, it was like cast the bait off. Typically, like I didn't have my swing right, and then the bait would be back there and the hook would be free, you know.
Look, when it works, it's an awesome feeling. Okay, you can do it, and you can be like, you see that? You see that? Like, you know what I mean?
I probably already know the answer, but are there guys using spinning rods specifically for that?
Oh, wait, before we go into that, and then let me add two things before we go to that topic, because I know that's controversial. I'll add two things. Some teams, and we actually we lost a sale yesterday doing exactly that, is when you do like hook one up and you kind of slow down, people prospect the longs as well. So you just drop it in the free spool for like 0.5 seconds, and then you while the boat's kind of slowing down, when it's really slowing down, it's when you wind back up. And it's a small thing that you can do, but it does help. And I'll say one thing that I love doing, and I've caught quite a few fish doing it, is when you're backing down on a fish, you fish your longs past the bow of the boat.
Yeah.
But you gotta,
you gotta have an angler with discipline. And you gotta know.
I do that always. Because like Anthony says, I always, as an angler, I try to always have a bait in the water. So when we're backing down, I'm feeding that thing. I'm fishing my longs past the bow at all times and just making sure it doesn't get under the boat so the captain doesn't get pissed. But
you gotta kind of like we do that a lot on our boat, but you kind of the first thing you got to do is run the bait as far up the rigger as you can get it.
Yeah,
right?
correct.
Ideally you want to leave it out there. If you got to put it back out, unless the fishing's really good, I don't think it's nearly as effective. And then you got to have an angler that knows when where the hooked fish is, if the boat starts to move a certain way, he's got to wind it up, or you're going to get it over. I mean, we've had it in the bow cleats, stuff like that. Then somebody gets bit, and then it's always interesting, but it doesn't sometimes work out. But I think it's worth the risk because you're not going to get that bite. In general, my theory, whether it be hooking a big blue marlin on a small gear or fishing in reverse, is like I'd rather get the bite than deal with it after. I'd rather, because getting the bite's the hardest part, and then you kind of deal with it after. We wait all day for bites sometimes.
Agreed.
Yeah. So take risk if you can, if you're willing to.
Yeah, I do it. I love it. I think it's awesome. Catch one doing it on reserve and reverse, and you'll do it forever. Like, it's the coolest thing ever.
Exhilarating for sure. We had that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we were actually walking to the bow with liveys doing that in Cabo. That was pretty fun. To the point you have like a triple header on the bow and then a double in the back. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, my guys did a trip to Mag Bay once, and we were fishing on this 87 foot boat called the Aussie Rules. It was a aluminum built sport fish. It was enormous, and the captain was nice enough to let me drive a little bit, and we were ballyhoo trolling like we do here on the East Coast and in Costa Rica. And then they had live bait, so we'd hook 4 or 5 striped marlins, and then as we're fighting them, my guys, being the guys that they are, it was a free for all, right? So they'd grab a bait out of the live well and run up to the bow, and they'd be trolling 2 off the bow. We'd like get close to releasing one, and they'd be like, "I got one here," and next thing you know, we'd be fighting fish for like an hour. Just because we would just not. They would just never let me get to the fish because they'd always have another one. It was pretty wild, but it was frustrating at the same time. They're out of control down there.
Yeah.
What's your next? I got a couple
about the spinning reel thing.
Let's go to that. I want to hear that.
Certain people say it's cheating. Certain people call it explicit languages. Let's leave it there. I think it's a disadvantage because they have this thing that they put on it, like the thing you clip your line in it, and it's like a release clip, I guess, that you put on the spinning reel. I don't know. I'm not a spinning reel guy, so I'm sure there's a term for that. But when you let a fish eat with that and you put your thing in free spool, you don't feel it because you see the line. You can put your finger kind of in it, but you can't really feel it as well as a conventional reel. So although some people think it's easier for beginners, which I'm sure it is, makes more sense, I think once you get a little more experience, you'll realize that the real advantage still goes to conventional reels. But I don't think it's bad or wrong. I know a lot of people hate a lot on that.
Yeah.
But that's what I think. Anthony, you?
There's a time and a place for a spinner. You know, for straight up trolling, I don't necessarily feel it's necessary, but like if you're fishing in an area where there's some fish around, like you can, and you're fighting one straight up and down, or your dead boat, you can pitch the spinner out behind the boat and wind it in, and you can get a bite like that. I know up here on the East Coast, if you actually like back up to a bait ball with white marlins on it and pitch a spinner, you're gonna get yelled at. But like if there's instances where the bait ball swims by the boat and you could pitch a spinner out and get another bait, I don't necessarily think that's, you know, against the rules. But
I would think a scenario like when our whites get pushed up onto the flat, like south of the vineyard, and you're pitching live scup and eels.
Well, yeah, that's
Bait rod is like what you would want. Like you need it super accurate because those fish generally aren't like an active feed. They're just, you know, moving with the sea and staying in the water they want to stay in. Yeah.
That scenario is in and of itself, you know, that's not, I would love to see that because I just mind blowing the water they live in up there and where they're living. It's crazy.
So
I find it fascinating.
So cool. Yeah. I have a question for you guys, a little bit more of a macro question. Tournament fishing or fun fishing? What do you prefer?
Go ahead, Leo.
Tournament fishing. I'm the most competitive guy you'll meet. I like to crush skulls of my enemies. And it just brings me tremendous joy.
I need crushing skulls of your enemies.
It brings me tremendous joy. I was already at the main boat show. I was listening to Michael Jordan's Last Dance soundtrack. Just how I'm going to crush everyone else at the show in terms of like sales and popularity. And I'm just that guy. And Nick, who works with us, who you guys have met, is kind of the same way. So I'm just built that way. Like I like pressure. I like really going hard and being competitive, and I just like that.
What about you, Anthony?
I would echo that. You don't have tournament fishing without good fun fishing. You know, we fish every day on our boat like a tournament. The guys hold the rods. We fish all exactly the same tackle. There's nothing different. So, and in an Ocean City, if you're the one that, you know, comes back with 10 flags and everybody doesn't, you know, you feel pretty good about it. And I think that's anywhere. So like every day is a tournament for us. So I would prefer, I don't know, you need to have those days where you practice and you enjoy it. It's supposed to be enjoyable for the anglers, but for our guys, they enjoy being competitive. Like Leo said, like they enjoy taking souls. So if we can do that, then even better, but it doesn't come without the practice. And like, you have to go fishing. I think that we talk about these sonars and these techniques and everything. None of this really works if you're not in the ocean doing it, you know? So any way I can get in the ocean and target marlins, I ideally, but even yellowfins and big eyes, I'm out there because I want to keep on working on my understanding of how water moves, how the fish move in the water, understanding the little details on where things are in the ocean and how to get more bites. And
you're never done building your instincts, and that drives most things.
Yeah. And we used to, back when I first started working with Pete on the Blood Money, we did a lot less fun fishing and a lot more tournament fishing, and we got our ass kicked. You know, like we just like the White Marlin Open, we were only fishing those 3 days of the week, and that you're just kind of going out there blind and hoping for the best. And, you know, you can have all the right tackle, but and the right boat and everything, but if you don't know what you're looking at, and that kind of comes from fun fishing, fun fishing or, you know, scouting, whatever, it's all supposed to be fun, but it's also on the Blood Money, it's also supposed to be pretty intense as well. So it doesn't really change. So, but they laugh and the guys laugh and giggle all day during the tournament. So they're out there having a good time, but they're also down there focused on what they need to do, but they're enjoying the downtime because you just can't, like, if you're just holding the rod all day, I don't know. It's just fun being on a boat with people you enjoy. And if you can't laugh and have fun, then it's my bosses might be blown away that I say this because they don't see that side of me when we're fishing. But I like to see them having fun and smiling. And I think it all helps if there's a good vibe on the boat. And then you get in the tournament, nothing really changes, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with it all. I'm a nerd.
Crush skulls.
What's that?
Crush skulls.
Crush skulls, yeah.
Crush skulls.
But you also got to be you also got to be ready to win, because there's only a handful of winners in any tournament, so you better be ready to have your ego checked when you're not, you know. And that's
Every time.
because it more often, I don't care how good you are. I think I watched something on that PGA where like the Netflix thing on the PGA guys are like, if you win 5% of the tournaments you play, you're as good as anybody in the world. You know, you're one of the best ever.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the same thing with fishing. Like if you win, you know, if you're competitive in every tournament, that's great. But if you're in the money on, you know, 3 out of 10 tournaments, that's pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
I know. I meant I want to crush skulls. Doesn't mean it
Yeah, I'm aware.
You gotta go in with that mindset, though. You're not.
Yeah. Doesn't mean that happens.
Yeah.
What's your next question?
I had one more technical question about teasers and dredges, and I've seen kind of both. I've seen two different kinds of, I guess, captains of what they do when they're controlling their teasers and dredges. When you guys have a fish, let's just say that you realize is on the dredge, I've seen captains, they'll pull it away from them immediately. Fish is touching the dredge. I've seen other captains, they leave the dredge in as long as the fish isn't touching the dredge. What's kind of like your go-to? And I know every boat's different because some boats you can't even see the dredge, you know, depending on how you get an express boat or whatever, that you might not be able to be as high and actually see your dredge and see the fish. So I know it's all a little different. And kind of the same question with a bridge teaser, you know, squid chain or whatever. You know, I've been in a situation where you see the actual fish coming to your squid chain, you know, from the side or whatever before he touches it. Are you doing anything to your squid chain? Are you letting him hit it several times before you move it? Like, what's kind of like your protocol with dredges and chains?
Do you want to try this, Leo? Or?
I would say again, I'll probably just give my thoughts, and Anthony will definitely have final opinion because he runs the boats. But from again, I've taken the helm a few times, so I know a little bit. So I'd say, as far as squid chain goes, the last thing you do not want to happen is for the fish to grab your bait, because then it might just swim away because it got what he wanted, right? So I would say I would definitely take. I pull my squid chains in by hand, so I would take 3 pulls basically to just take it away from the fish, so you're kind of caught in the clear. Because if you decide to leave it there and that fish comes again, it might just grab the bait, and that's the ultimate risk, right? So I would take 3 arm wraps and wait to see where it's at. That's what I would do with my bridge teaser. As far as stretch goes, I don't know, man. Some captains that I fish with pull it right away. So it doesn't, because what you don't want to happen is for that fish to be very aggressive. You pull the bridge teaser all the way in, and all of a sudden it gets ahead of the dredge, and the fish switches to the dredge, and then you're screwed, right? So I understand that's why a lot of people pull the dredges in right away, immediately. But I can also see the fact that you don't want to do that, because then you might not attract double or triple headers. So I guess it depends per location. I would say in a place where you're blue marlin fishing, where it's not doubles and triples, I'd say pull your dredges in immediately, because those are also tend to come in hot on a teaser and come all into the boat, whereas the marlin might stay back there and you can leave your dredges back. But as far as white marlin fishing or sail fishing, I'd probably leave the dredges out there for a little bit. Also depends on your crew. If you have the staff that's fast and good, they can monitor their dredges and really quickly push the buttons and all that. But yeah, I'd say mainly main thing is take 3 arms off the teasers and see where the fish is at. And I'd probably, just to stay safe, is I'd pull your dredges in all the way in immediately.
So when you're doing 3 arms lengths, are you doing that after the fish touches the teaser first?
For the first time, yeah.
Okay, so if the fish is coming up to your teaser and you're watching him come up to it, are you moving it before he touches it, or are you letting him touch it first?
No. So at the first, I'm thinking from the mindset of, you got yanked at your teaser, right? Then you'll take 3 arms length and then wait and see where he's at. As minute you see him coming behind you, obviously you pull it away, right? If he's very aggressive, you'll pull it away. Sometimes with some people, if it's like a cold fish, he's not really doing much, you'll leave it there just to see if he lights up. And if he lights back up, then you'll do that. But again, I would say that what you really do not want to happen is for the fish to grab that chaser bait, right? But Anthony, this is your thing, Anthony. You comment on this.
I would say, yeah, I mean, I'm not far off Leo. I think that I would treat the dredges and the teasers differently. Starting with the dredges, you know, if you mark a fish and you're like, man, I know he's back there, and you don't see him, it'd be a good idea to maybe wind your dredges up and check them to see if they're there. And I think that helps because, you know, if you move the dredge, they become a little bit more interested and you gain a little bit more control over the fish. So like if you pull if you mark one, and this is just on the initial biter before you get the interaction, right? So you're trolling along, you mark a nice mark on your bottom machine, you're like, man, I don't know, I think he's kind of back there. Maybe wind it in, you know, depending on the, you know, you don't know which side he's on typically. So wind them both in. Maybe if you have like the 24 volt LPs or the 12 volt, maybe just do it on the slow side instead of like, you know, because you're not really sure, but you pull the dredge away from him and he becomes a little bit more interested. It becomes a little bit more interested, right? So that's my theory on the dredges. Like if they're back there maybe 20 feet behind the dredge and they see the dredge going away, they typically swim to the dredge and at least become more interested. And then you really have their attention, right? And then maybe they'll you can switch them off on the flat line, or they come to the teaser. And that's kind of an automatic thing that I've started doing the last couple of years is, you know, moving the dredges, getting the dredges moving. Even if I don't know if I kind of have a feeling there might be a fish, I'll be like, move the dredge, just wind it up to beneath the surface. And if there's nothing there, set it back, you know? And then as far as the teasers go, I think it's unique to the fish, you know, like if there's one, like Leo said, like if he comes like and smokes your teaser and takes 20 feet off of it, you start yanking on that thing because he's coming back, right? Ideally, you like to feel a little like, I don't mind if it gets a little tug on the teaser. It's when he crushes the teaser again and realizes that this isn't what he's looking for, that I think you get in, not, they might get wise to it. You know, I don't think that they're ever thinking like this is a boat and these people are trying to catch me, but I think that they're like, this is strange, you know? So, so like you raise a fish and like in a certain situation, like if the wind is going against the current and you have the good tailing conditions, as they say down in Florida, like, and you raise a lazy fish on like a white marlin on the long rig, or even a blue, or on the teaser, you got to kind of judge them. Like I definitely grab enough of the teaser to like make sure if he does lunge at it that I have enough pull to really start yoking on it. But I've reached for the teaser and started pulling away because I hadn't seen a fish in a while, and like he just loses interest. So you kind of got to judge what the mood of the fish is in, you know? I mean, typically in the Northeast, from the mid-Atlantic up to the Northeast, they're there to eat, you know, they're coming in there, whether it be a white or a blue, they're going to eat it. And if they eat it, they'll eat it again and again, you know? But one thing I will say is if it's a blue, you got to get the dredge coming. Cause I had an instance last week or a couple of weeks ago in Los Sueños where we didn't get the dredge coming fast enough. And we were teasing him, and then he just fucking kamikaze the dredge, like full on, like tease, eating the teaser, and then just sees the dredge and crushes it, and just gets and then he swam away. And I'm like, God damn. And I've had it where, you know, the teaser's coming and he yanks on the teaser a couple times, and the dredge they don't pull the dredge tight to the boat, and you just pull the dredge over his back, and he swims away. You know, it kind of so. The main thing when you get the bite, my thing is like, if you know there's a fish there, get the dredge moving. And if there's a fish on the teaser, just get the dredge out of the way. You know, if there's one on the long rigger, keep the dredge maybe in the water. Maybe his friends are there, but if he's coming in the teaser position or closer, you need to get the dredge out of the way because it can become a problem.
Yeah, we actually fed a blue marlin this was maybe 3 years ago. Came up on the teaser, and it actually ate a blue marlin lure, and we didn't get the dredge out of the water fast enough, and it actually started greyhounding next to the boat, and our rods pointed off the back, but because of so much bow, he was actually in our dredge, and we actually broke him off, and that would have won the tournament with that fish. But if we got the dredge out of the water, that's like another point. Those things, they'll jump in front of the boats so fast.
Oh yeah. And I had a really cool fish last year where I was trolling through a school of two-tone porpoises, and I kind of let my guard down because we were having a good morning, but it wasn't great fishing. So we had a charter on the boat that kind of didn't fish that often. So I was like, oh, let me go through the school of porpoises, and I kind of let my guard down. I'm like leaning over the back of the chair a little bit, looking at the spread, and I see this fin out of all these porpoises, and I'm like, is that what I thought it was? And I just give it one pull on the teaser, and a blue marlin crushes it. And he comes, I tease him, and he's right. We get the dredge out of the way, and I'm like, blue marlin left teaser, and we pull it, and I pull it up to the side of the boat. The pitch is out there, and nothing happens. And I'm in a turn, and he eats the opposite teaser. And he eats that, and he follows that to the boat, all the way to the boat, and the same thing happens. And when being dumb, because I'm not sometimes get excited, I just dropped the other teaser, and it went back into position. So same thing happens, and he eats the other teaser, and he does this 3 times before.
Holy shit.
So he goes from back in the middle of this porpoise school. We're doing circles, and he finally I get him on the left teaser again, and I was able to do something with the boat, so I get the pitch bait a little bit more in the cleaner water. And my mate, who's a really experienced mate, Marshall Frang, one of the mates on the boat, I'm like, wind it up. And he's done a lot of fishing, and I could tell he's winding this 50 up. And he's like, man, I don't know. This is a little close quarters. And he gets smoked. And the thing, he feeds it, and the bait goes flying in the air 10 feet, right? And lands in the middle of the wash, and he gets crushed again. And then the fish lays there, and he's feeding it. And he comes tight, and there's nothing there, but there's weight on the rod, right? So he's like, I'm like, do you have him? He's like, I don't know. And he's like pumping and whining like he's got him, but there's no line taking or anything like that. So he's whining, and the line's coming right to the back of the boat, whining, and the fish, like, literally, he winds the reel on the rod tip, the leader on the rod, and the fish is like literally behind the boat staring at the propellers. There's no teasers in the water at this point. Wow. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, I guess he's there. And I just kind of pulled forward a little quicker, and he finally turned around and way left. But they're attracted to the propellers. I've had that where they kind of swim to the boat before they're hooked. I don't know where I was going with that story, but
that's an action-packed feed right there.
Wow.
It was like a 3-minute interaction before we even came tight on the thing. But it's like one of those things where you got to kind of feel him out. That thing was eaten, he wasn't leaving without us either fucking it up or catching him, and thankfully somehow we didn't mess it up.
Speaking of fucking it up,
Great segue.
What's the worst backlash you've ever experienced or had on the boat that you were running as an angler, captain? Worst backlash experience or experiences?
Go ahead, Leo. I got all sorts
of experiences. They all suck. But humbling experiences, it's a damn backlash. Just when you think you've seen it all and you've done it all, you make the beginner mistake of just damn backlash, and you're just like, what just happened here? So I think all of them are just horrible. I don't have like one that really stands out that much. I haven't backlashed a fish that was like an obvious one. Like I've backlashed, the spontaneous long rigger bite you didn't expect. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really have but they all suck. They're all horrible. The worst feeling ever. Like I'd rather miss a fish than actually backlash one. That's just because he's hooked. He's hooked, taking line, and you're like, no. And you just see a thing flying to the horizon. That's
jumping
painful.
around for 10 minutes. Sometimes they jump around for
with the line in the mouth, it just makes it worse. It's just not good.
We have a saying on our boats: "What you do wrong that counts," because nobody ever remembers the fish that go right, but everybody remembers the shit that goes wrong, and we have plenty go wrong. A good one that I've had when we were up in the Hudson fishing the Jimmy Johnson in Atlantic City, and I like marked these like 6 or 8 marks on the sonar, and I paddle over there, and I marked these giant arches on the bottom machine. I'm like, what the fuck are these things? I was like, there's no whales, I don't see anything. And then there's just this enormous hole behind the flat line and then the long rigger, and both of them just goes. They don't have a. The guys are holding them with the clickers off, but I hear oh no, and I hear pow, and then that's one goes pow. And I'm like, oh my God, what the fuck just happened? And I'm like, did we just backlash 2 blue marlins, or what is going on here? And come to find out, Danny Scotty on the Gina Lisa got jumped by giant bluefins, and I assume that's what they were, because they were the biggest marks I'd ever seen. And so those were, I mean, there was not from a like, it didn't really matter because we weren't allowed to catch them in that tournament. So just from a epicness standpoint, the holes that were left in the water and how quickly it went from zero to oh my God, those are pretty epic backlashes.
0 to 0. 0 to 0 to 0.
Those are pretty epic. And then I mean, we have backlashes a lot on get jumped by tunas or something like that. But billfish backlashes, tunas are
the worst.
Yeah, billfish.
Those don't happen often.
Yeah. I have one guy that on our boat that I would put my life on the line. I'd be like, if there's a fish that needs to be caught in a pressure situation, this is the guy, right? And first day of the White Marlin Open 2 years ago, we were having a good day. I think we'd missed a blue and caught 4 or 5 by this time, and we were in the running for the daily, right? And we were in these conditions that you would raise a fish that kind of would show itself before it went to anything, kind of like the tailing conditions I was talking about earlier. And I was like, I marked one here, and the fish appears, and he's kind of like one of those lazy ones that are kind of behind the teaser. So you tease him in. I'm like, all right. He kind of fades out, and he comes right. And this is like all very obvious down sea. Like everybody's watching this happen. This guy gets bit. I'm like, jig it twice and hold it. And he jigs it, and it catches him right in the middle of a jig, right? And he smokes him. And I saw the fish light up and eat him. And I was like, all right, cool. And he's like, backlash. And I'm like, really? I couldn't believe it. This guy was backlashing it. So I throw it in reverse, and we didn't get him. And we ended up losing top boat in the White Marlin Open by on time.
That's my fear. That's my fear too. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Anthony. Because when my fear always when you're bill fishing is just you have a hot fish and left teaser, and you pull for the captain pulls 4 cranks out, but then you gotta take your reel from free spool, put that thing, give it drag, and wind it to the teaser. But what happens if a fish bites it right there? Now, what you can do is you hold it away where you do like a whip, and you have like a 0.1 second to put it in free spool. But again, if you have an aggressive fish, that's not going to be enough, and it's going to feel that drag, and a backlash happens when it goes from no drag to a lot of free spool, right? So that's a very big risk. Like you said, when you jig it and it ends up biting you, you can get into hot territory. But like what I do, Anthony, I don't know what you think about this. Like what I do is, so I actually hold it out with my left hand so I can move the drag up and down with ease. Like when I crank my bait to the teaser, I hold it in like the same free spool with my thumb on it.
Yeah.
And I give it a little bit of drag, and then I crank it like there. So that when I go to free spool, just quickly shift it to free spool with that same right hand, while my left hand has the thumb on it already in position. But that is my fear, man. I don't know. Has it ever happened to you? It never happened to you yet, but like I'm dead scared of that happening.
Yeah, I mean, before I ran boats, I fucked off things in the cockpit my whole career. So yeah.
What about you? What about backlash stories for you?
I have
many. The worst one was definitely hooking. I just told this story in another podcast, but basically the giant bluefin went under the boat, and I tried to push the line off, not knowing that I could back the drag off on anchor, and burned right to the bone on all 4 of my fingers. And then we backlashed when it dipped and went back under the corner of the boat out the stern. I just loosened it too much, ended up breaking the fish off. But probably the worst, not necessarily backlash story, but line, like tangling type thing was, and I did tell this on a podcast a while back, but I know there's new listeners. We had a lady.
This one is unfucking believable.
So we were fighting a bluefin stand up, and this lady decides to help her husband pump the fish. So she gets down on one knee.
So I'm the lady.
Yeah, and she gets down on one knee and she's holding the rod over on her shoulder, basically, and like pumping the fish like with her 2 hands in her shoulder, while the husband's stand up in a harness. And he actually reels her hair into the reel.
Oh no!
Yes, all the way to the point that, like,
What?
you know, when you reel against the drag, she's reeling 25 pounds against the drag with her head. Her head is buried into the spool. Oh yeah, and we ended up basically having to make a split decision, because if the fish ran, God knows what would happen. So we had to make the split decision of, okay, do we just cut her hair, or do we like back the drag off slow? You know,
There was no thought about it just cutting the fish off, was
no,
it?
God no. It was like we needed it was our only bite in the day, and it happened very quickly. But it's the story sounds like a long
Wasn't she
story.
screaming like
She screamed quick, and right away, as the captain was
shit.
going to get a knife to cut the line, I backed the drag off like wicked slow, and it just like crept out, and all the hair came out like perfectly, and she lost no hair. But dude, it was like
Talk about things that can go
scream
wrong.
was like her getting stabbed.
I love that story.
That's incredible.
I have
That is
2.
wild.
Whatever happened? So you were able to get her hair out of there
And got
without
the
like
fish, yeah.
removing her scalp?
Yeah, we almost cut like the side of her head out, basically.
And you lost the rod before that.
Yeah.
You had a
Same day.
rod jump out of the holder and get caught at the tip of the rigger and lost that too.
Safety lines.
The rod is that big.
Yeah. You learn from your mistakes. We had, just to kind of harp on how dangerous backlashes can be, especially with heavy tackle.
Sound must be amazing.
I had a fish. So I have 2 stories. One's from Canada, one's from here. The one from here is quick. Coming up on drift, I just killed a short, and there were some bigger fish around, like 90 to 105-inch fish around. Come up on drift. My mate's getting one of the floater rods out, and he doesn't even have the balloon on. It's basically a down rod at this point. And I've watched this just like vertical streak come off the bottom at like 200 feet. And I'm like, couldn't even get the words out of my mouth. And the fish ate and immediately swims under the bow. I'm on the center console. So rod's on the starboard side. He eats and swings, from midship up forward under the bow. And I tell him, like, back it off. And he had already, what I didn't know is he was already at like 42 pounds on the bite. Like he just slipped past like our creep, like our bite drag, like 30, 35 pounds, and was right up there. And when he backed it off, I just heard the noise, saw the rod. And it was, we're trying to get these guys a giant, and thing starts to rat's nest, but it's not at the point of like, oh shit yet. It's at like, I see the big loop starting. So I'm like holding the rod off of my left hand, and I reach over the reel with my right hand to push the drag back up, and the loop caught my fucking finger and pinned me to the reel and broke 150 jinkai on my right ring finger, cut it and cauterized it all the way down to the bone like that. Like it happened in less than a second. That was one. That was terrifying. We broke them off, lost the fish, but that was one eye-opening experience for me. That was, you think those stupid little things and you joke about backsplashes and give your buddy shit, but it can, take your fucking limb off if you're not careful, or deglove a finger, whatever. The other story isn't necessarily a backlash moment, although I think we had a couple backlashes as it was all occurring, but we were side by side with another boat in Canada. So we're, fishing the same bottom on our herring nets, using our herring nets like anchors. And if you picture an anchor, right? So you have your anchor side, then you have your painter line that you're attached to. Well, on a herring net where you're attached, the net is 10 feet high going down, then you have a concrete block in the boat that is, holds the net down to the bottom. So we're hanging off the anchor side. We've got like 2 fish under the boat for half an hour, not eating.
So when you get a bite, you throw the block, and
you basically you have a wrap on the hauler. You're hanging on the hauler, then you get a bite. He picks his direction. You unwrap the hauler, everything starts to go free. Then you have to quickly throw your cinder block, and then you're coming down tied. Everything comes tight again, and then you're off to the races. So this fish eventually eats a herring. We went down to 1 rod, ate a herring, came up, smoked. They were like, all right, we're on. He's running offshore, and we're looking at the line angle. It's like, it looks like he's over the next guy's net. So the other guy's setup is exactly the same. We're like, it looks like he's over it, but he has so much scope out that we're going to basically need to back into this guy to get on this fish. So I think it was Kurt. This guy, one of the boys up there, and like, yeah, Kurt, can you drop off for us? He's like, yeah, no problem. He drops off. And as we're backing up to the net, the line angle starts going drastic. We're like, fuck, he just laid his net right over our Dacron. Like straight up, we must have been in the middle of the net, just how much scope he had out. So we get up on it, and you can do 2 things. You can try to untangle, which is what we did, or you can back free spool off and fucking saw the poor guy's net in half and then be on your way. But these 2 nets were particularly productive, so we didn't want to ruin the whole situation that we had. So we get up on top of it. Long story short, what we ended up doing was we grabbed the cinder block side of his net and threw it in the hauler with an angler in the chair on backed off drag, and hauled the net back up, and realized that he was already down to the anchor side. He was already in the fucking anchor. So we drop off, we drive back up to the anchor side. Meanwhile, line's still going, 130 just emptying.
Wow.
We ended up hauling a 150-pound rebar anchor off the bottom. 2 guys, me and the mate, hauled it off the bottom with the angler in the chair. And another guy is holding us tight to the net on the cinder block side, so we have enough slack to throw the anchor over the rod. So we were down to 20 wraps on a 130. We passed a 150-pound rebar anchor over the Dacron 3 times with an angler in the chair, with a guy holding, dumped the whole thing, kept backing up, and we got him.
Nice.
Probably the most insane line situation I've ever been in my life, just from that much pressure at the hook, that much pressure on the line with the net. Just goes to show you how fucking strong that shit can be. So never mind being in a normal safe situation, being in a backlash situation, someone can get hurt real quick. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, you look back on that story and you're like, well, so much of that stuff was just so stupid. But yeah, like in the moment you're gonna do it. But like, I mean, dealing with that sort of somebody slips and ends up in the water, you're in Canada, you're fucked.
You're screwed. But it goes to show you, kind of the common theme in every one of these questions that we've had, and it all boils down to communication and teamwork. Like the Omni sonar, the art of the turn, the dredge fishing, the teaser fishing, like none of that shit works unless you have a group of people that are cohesive and they communicate well. So that's if anyone gets anything from this conversation, the talks about the podcast and what we got going on business wise and just the relationship building aside, if you can just understand that it's all about, having fun, being in good communication and having good people, like that's the recipe. Like the rest of it is just a nice to have tool,
Yeah. And, like, as far as like, people getting into the sport, getting offshore, whether it be tuna fishing or off canyon fishing, like, and you're with a group of buddies, just be patient with everybody, like, I think that was like my remember years ago, I was super intense because I came from a bunch of captains that were super intense, and I just didn't know that there was another way. I wasn't the greatest person to be on a boat with, and I feel like if you have people that are there putting in the effort, if something goes wrong, just be like, let's try to take a step back and relax a little bit. It's hard because there's a lot of money and free time wrapped up in this, and you want to be successful, but just try to enjoy the process and being with your family, your friends, whoever, and enjoy like I said, what you do wrong that counts. Enjoy the fuck ups, because we only tell stories about the fuck ups, not the ones we call it.
It gets better. I'll tell you that. I'm not gonna lie. The backlashes hurt, but at the end of the day, the good thing is the more fish you see, the kind of less you start caring. It sounds like a weird way, but it's kind of that way. Like,
well, you develop the understanding that there will be another one. Like, if
yes,
yeah. Because when you're starting, you're like, it's been like, you get a bite, you're like, this is never going to happen again.
Yeah, exactly. You feel like that's the end of the world.
Yeah. So I don't know. Enjoy the process a little bit. Try to enjoy it and bring some intensity to it if that's your style. Some people, I've fished with some amazing captains, and they're just like, yeah, it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
And other guys are super focused. Some people are like, yeah, we're going to show up and they're going to be there. I'm like, what? All right. And
cool,
we are
collected is super important.
Yeah.
In every situation. Boys, this has been, I think that's a good little bit to end on there. We've been going for a couple hours. Absolute pleasure talking to both of you. I'm really glad that we got a chance to do this, and I definitely want to make this a frequent thing, whether we do it once a season, whatever, do a catch up. This is really great. So
can I make one request?
Absolutely.
I would like to dedicate this podcast to Captain Chris Collin of Marlin Darlin. He's an important member of our industry, and he ran the Marlin Darlin for many, many years, and he was just an overall great guy. I didn't know him too well. I know I spoke to him on text many times. He loved our Carrillo camo hat, and he's been good friends with Nick and everyone. I know he passed away a few days ago. I know a lot of people are hurting because of it. So I just wanted to dedicate this pod to that, if that's okay with you guys, because it is your pod.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Okay. Sounds like a great guy. Anyone that you guys are close with, you all seem like awesome humans. So 100% shout out and dedicate this to him.
Okay, awesome.
How do people, obviously everyone knows you have the podcast, but share with our listeners and your listeners how to follow you guys and everything that you have going on before we wrap up.
It's on Instagram, it's Billfish Group, Billfish Gear. We post most of our custom gear projects on Billfish Gear. That's been doing really well for us. On the podcast side, it's State of Sportfishing on pretty much every platform. On YouTube, it's Billfish TV. And I think that's it for us. Anthony, go ahead.
Hook Optics on Instagram, and Hook Optics on Facebook, and then the Blood Money Sport Fishing page is pretty entertaining. My boss does a good job of keeping the camera in his hands when things go wrong. So, sport fishing thing, Blood Money Sport Fishing. So, and then my personal is Anthony Pino, the real Anthony Pino, because I got hacked once.
It's amazing. Oh, I love it. Well, awesome guys. Anything you got?
I'm good. I appreciate this.
Yeah,
this has been cool.
This is great.
Thanks, man.
We'll end this on our dad's 3 words of fishing wisdom. Remember, you can't catch them if you don't have a hook in the water. Always trust your instincts. And the last one, you'll have to keep listening. Stay tight, everybody.
Thank you very much for tuning in to the SeaBros Fishing Podcast. If you would like more information about today's guest, our episode, and show sponsors, or if you want to order hats and apparel, please visit our website at SeaBrosFishing.com. You can also stay up to date on all the latest SeaBros fishing content and podcast episodes by following us on Instagram at SeaBros Fishing. Finally, to book a trip with us through our family-run charter fishing company, please visit MassBayGuides.com or see our latest updates and fishing reports by following Mass Bay Guides on Instagram and Facebook.